They let you cry alone while laughing with someone else. That sentence alone carries the weight of 1,000 heartbreaks. It reveals a truth many of us try to ignore because we aren't ready to accept it. But today, let's talk about it. Not in a poetic, sugar-coated way, but in an honest, educational, soul-awakening way. When someone lets you cry alone, it tells you everything you need to know about your place in their life. Emotions are the most vulnerable, raw parts of us, and the ones who are meant to be close, the ones we trust, the ones we love, are supposed to be there when we break. Not just during the happy days, not just during celebrations, not just when it benefits them, but when your world collapses and your tears are all you have left. That's when their absence speaks louder than anything else ever could. Why is this important to recognize? Because emotional neglect is one of the most silent forms of abandonment. It doesn't always come with a breakup, or a fight, or a betrayal. Sometimes, it's just you sitting alone with a heart full of pain, while the person you needed is out enjoying life as if you were never part of theirs. And that hurts more than anything, doesn't it? That silent abandonment creates invisible wounds. You begin to question your worth, your importance, your role in their life. You start asking, was I ever enough? Did they ever care? But here's the educational truth: you were enough. You were just giving your all to someone who didn't know how to receive it, or worse, the pattern. When someone can walk away while you're crying, it means your pain was never their priority. And the harsh reality is this: you cannot teach someone how to love you while they're busy choosing someone else. Love is not something that requires begging. Respect is not something that should be fought for. Support in pain is not a luxury. It's a necessity in real connection. Emotional support is the foundation of all meaningful relationships, whether it's romantic, platonic, or familial. When you're hurting and someone walks away, either literally or emotionally, they're revealing that they're not emotionally safe. And emotional safety is what we all need to thrive. Now, let's take a step back and look at this educationally. Why do people stay with those who let them cry alone? Why do we cling to those who are emotionally absent? The answer lies in unresolved trauma, in attachment wounds, in the belief that we have to earn love. Maybe you were taught to believe that your emotions are a burden. Maybe you were raised in a household where tears were silenced, not soothed. So when someone lets you cry alone, a part of you whispers, "I deserve this." But that whisper is not your truth, it's your wound speaking. If you've been left crying alone while someone else laughs with another, you must understand it's not your fault. But it is your responsibility to not let it happen again. We teach people how to treat us, and if you keep showing up for someone who disappears the moment life gets dark, you're telling them it's okay. You're saying, "My pain is mine to carry alone. You're free to leave." And over time, this pattern becomes your prison. You'll keep giving, and they'll keep taking until there's nothing left of you. Let's talk about boundaries. When someone lets you cry alone, that's a boundary violation. And not just any violation, it's a deep one. It's a signal that you need to protect your space, your peace, and your emotions. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. You decide who gets access and when. And someone who disappears during your pain should not have the key. Sometimes you won't get closure. You won't get an apology. You won't get that text saying, "I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me." And that's okay. Because closure isn't something someone gives you, it's something you give yourself. When you finally accept the truth of their actions. It's hard to accept that someone you love can laugh while you cry. It breaks your spirit. But that pain is not meant to destroy you, it's meant to wake you up. To open your eyes to the reality of how far you've strayed from self-respect. Pain is a teacher. And if you let it, this kind of heartbreak will teach you the most important lesson of all. Never prioritize someone who treats your emotions like a background noise. Let's talk about the psychological side of this. Emotional abandonment can lead to anxiety, depression, feelings of unworthiness, and trust issues. It can make you fear future connections. It can cause you to over-explain your feelings, constantly seek validation, and doubt your own experiences. That's not love. That's trauma in disguise. And healing from this isn't instant. It's a process. It's learning how to comfort yourself when no one else does. It's standing in front of the mirror and telling yourself, I will never let myself be abandoned like that again. It's rewriting the script. You stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop hoping that one day they'll understand your worth because you understand it now. Don't romanticize someone who couldn't sit with you in silence. Don't glorify a connection that required you to suffer in isolation. Love is presence. Real love shows up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy, especially when it hurts. So many people hold on to someone simply because they have history. But history means nothing if they let your pain become your private prison while they enjoy freedom elsewhere. You're not here to be someone's option while they're your priority. You're not meant to pour into someone who doesn't even notice when your glass is empty. Learn to identify emotional negligence as clearly as you'd identify betrayal, because that's what it is. A betrayal of trust, a betrayal of emotional safety, a betrayal of the bond you believed was real. Now, ask yourself, what kind of love do you deserve? Someone who makes you cry, then walks away, or someone who sits beside you, holds your hand, and says, I may not have the answers, but I'm here. That's love, that's partnership, that's what you deserve. And just because you haven't received that yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means you've been looking in the wrong places, or accepting less than what's worthy of you. If someone lets you cry alone once, you notice. If they do it twice, you remember. But if they do it a third time, and you still stay, that's no longer about them. That's about you. That's about your inner child not feeling worthy enough to demand more. That's about the fear of being alone overpowering your need for peace. That's about thinking loneliness is scarier than abandonment. But here's the truth. There's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. You can be surrounded by people and feel completely unseen. You can be in a relationship and still cry yourself to sleep. Real connection is about presence, not proximity. So, here's the question, what are you teaching others by allowing them to be absent during your pain? What standards are you setting for your life? You can't force someone to value your emotions, but you can stop giving them access. You can stop showing up for those who disappear. You can stop crying over people who are laughing elsewhere. Choose you. Choose the version of you that refuses to suffer in silence. Choose the future where your emotions are seen, held, and respected. You've done enough crying alone. Now it's time to rise alone, if needed, but in dignity, in strength, and in truth. Because if they let you cry alone once, you owe it to yourself to never give them the chance again. When someone lets you cry alone while they laugh with someone else, it's not just about abandonment, it's about emotional cruelty. Even if it's unintentional, it shows you who they really are when the spotlight isn't on you. And that is far more educational than any sweet words or hollow promises they ever gave you. People show their truest selves in two situations: when you're in pain and when they think you can't see them. If your tears didn't stop them from laughing elsewhere, that's not miscommunication. That's misalignment. It means your pain was never important enough to pause their comfort. And that realization, as brutal as it is, becomes the beginning of wisdom. Here's what needs to be deeply understood: emotional connection isn't just about the good times. Anyone can show up to celebrate with you, but those who are emotionally safe, those who truly care, they sit with you in the darkness. They don't always have solutions, but they don't walk away when you break. That's the difference. And that's the truth most people ignore because they don't want to accept they've been investing their emotions in someone emotionally bankrupt. Think about the psychology of neglect. We all have attachment styles shaped by our earliest experiences. If you grew up in an environment where emotions were dismissed or invalidated, you're more likely to tolerate emotional neglect as an adult. You normalize pain, you rationalize mistreatment, you convince yourself they didn't mean it, or they were just busy, or they didn't know how much I needed them. But here's the thing: someone who genuinely cares doesn't need a manual to know that you shouldn't be left alone in your worst moments. That's instinct. That's love in its most basic form. When they laughed with someone else while you cried, they made a choice. Maybe they didn't say the words, but their actions screamed, "You're not my priority." And that hurts deeply, but it's also a gift, because now you see the truth. Now you can stop romanticizing a connection that was never rooted in mutual care. Let's dive deeper. Why do we cling so hard to people who let us down? Because we confuse intensity with intimacy. We confuse shared memories with shared values. We confuse proximity with partnership. But true connection isn't just about how long you've known someone. It's about how they show up in your life. Especially when it's not convenient. Especially when you're vulnerable. Especially when it requires effort. And let's talk about effort, because love isn't passive. Love is intentional. It doesn't mean you never make mistakes, but it means you care enough to show up, to apologize, to stay, to check in. If someone can vanish emotionally when you need them the most, they're not incapable, they're unwilling. That's a bitter pill to swallow. We want to believe people mean well, that they didn't know better, that their heart is good, just misdirected. But intention without action is useless. At the end of the day, you don't heal from someone's intentions. You heal from their behavior. You have to learn to stop making excuses for people who abandoned you in your storm. Your pain deserves a witness. Your emotions deserve to be held, not ignored. And you deserve someone who doesn't vanish when things get heavy. Here's a truth we don't talk about enough. The one who lets you cry alone is teaching you more than the one who wipes your tears. Because they're showing you exactly what not to settle for ever again. That heartbreak becomes your greatest teacher. It forces you to confront your patterns. It compels you to ask, why do I accept this? And when you start asking that question, real change begins. Emotional neglect leaves scars that don't bleed, but they ache, especially in silence. And the worst part, the pain doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being alone when you weren't supposed to be. It's the betrayal of expectation, the shattering of trust. The moment you realize that the person you needed the most didn't show up not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. But here this healing starts when you stop waiting for someone to return and fix what they broke. Healing begins when you stop hoping they'll feel the weight of your tears. Some people never will. And that has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their capacity. You are not too much. You were just too emotional for someone who wanted things light and easy. And that's not your fault. If they could sit in laughter while you sat in pain, that says more about them than it ever will about you. You don't have to match their indifference. You don't have to harden yourself to be strong. But you do have to make a decision to stop begging for presence from someone who chooses absence. You teach people how to love you not by what you tolerate, but by what you walk away from. If they didn't show up when you needed them the most, that's the loudest message you'll ever receive. You don't need a text. You don't need an apology. You don't need a reason. The silence was loud enough. And from that silence, you rise, wiser, clearer, stronger. Not because they broke you, but because you decided their absence was the last time you'd ever betray yourself in the name of love. Don't let the loneliness trick you into going back to what broke you. There's a different kind of pain waiting for you if you do the pain of self-abandonment, of knowing you had a choice and you still chose someone who never chose you back. You owe yourself more patience, more kindness, more self-respect. You owe it to yourself to walk away from anyone who can't handle the weight of your tears. Because the right person, they won't need to be told you're in pain, they'll feel it, and they'll show up. Not because you asked, but because love doesn't leave when it's inconvenient. So, if they let you cry alone while they laughed with someone else, don't cry over them again. Use those tears to cleanse the illusion. Use that pain to rebuild boundaries. Use that memory as a lesson, not a life sentence. Because the lesson is this: love without emotional presence is just performance, and you deserve more than a role in someone else's play. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be held. You deserve to be loved in the storm, not just in the sunshine.